Okay, we're meeting with Leslie M. of 3 Training today. Leslie, thanks so much for joining AdBuzz.
My pleasure, my pleasure.
We've wanted to meet with you for a little while, but the schedules just don't match, and we're always busy, and I don't know, but you got us in pretty quick, so anyways, we're here. Leslie, why don't you share with us what 3 Training is and what you're doing with agencies right now?
Well, 3 Training started when I was a creative director, and I had come from a background of having been a television host and having had a performance background. So when I came into the agency world, aside from being a big idea girl, I could present anything to anybody. I could sell crotchless knickers to the Queen, and that really made a difference for me as an agency professional. And what I really noticed is that agency people were kind of thrown in at the deep end on a regular basis, and not everybody naturally had the kind of skills that they really needed to survive in the ad world. And as I watched my own teams really suffer and didn't have the bandwidth to help them, nor really the expertise, I kind of figured that there was a huge gap in the market, because we couldn't find training that was quality training that was relevant to who we were. You know, you'd get these trainers in who really had no idea what the ad biz was all about, and we hated these guys, right? So I decided that I would leave the ad business and continue to work with the people that I loved, who were ad people, but find a way to bring sort of a sense of support and knowledge and sort of relevance and expertise back to the industry. So I started my journey on figuring out how to best facilitate this kind of training, and did a lot of learning myself, and then attacked the ad biz like crazy. And there really weren't organizations out there who were specifically geared towards training for agencies. So that was my sweet spot, and I wanted to spend time with all the people that I loved and knew in the industry. So that's how 3 Training was born.
Right. And how do you feel that agencies work with students come in, they've been training for 3, 4, 5, sometimes 6 years, and they enter a world where they're still going to expect to be trained and continue, but do you feel that agencies are stepping up and able to train them the way they should?
No. Quite frankly, I think what happens is it's kind of a sink or swim environment, and that's always been what the ad business is all about. I mean, there have been agencies all along who really had a culture of training. Ogilvy was one that really valued training for years and years, and I think what happened was there was a couple of things happened. First of all, ad people kind of convinced themselves that the best way to become a true ad person was to learn by doing, and that there was no other way to learn. Now, this could be based on the fact that there was no really good relevant training out there, so they had no choice but to learn by doing. I think the other problem was that it's so incredibly fast-paced, and it's so fly by the seat of your pants, that it was just get in there and do, and the cream rises to the top, and the people who don't really get it fall by the wayside, which is brutal, and it's, you know, it's not the way that it should be, you know, because everybody has different ways of learning and doing and so on and so forth. And I think over the past 10 years, I think budgets also have been a pretty big deal, and when you have to allocate budgets, training tends to fall to the bottom of the pile.
Right. So what is it that you think that agencies need to improve the most on when it comes to building that relationship up and the helping nurture the students, I guess, is when they're coming in?
Well, I think when a student comes into an agency, and I've seen this so many times with kids that I've worked with, it's I mean, it's exciting, it's terrifying. Mm-hmm. It's a chance to bark with the big dogs, and they want to do the best that they can, and it's all kind of gung-ho. But I don't think there's any training or any education that can really prepare you for what it's like to be in the deep end at an agency. And you know, you can case study yourself up the yin-yang and so on and so forth. But when you're getting feedback from a client, and it's brutal feedback, and you've got to adapt in 2 seconds, and you know, you've got to face the reality of somebody, you know, cutting your head off in the room and so on and so forth. Those are things that you can't you know, prepare for. Right. And so they come in with all the best intentions, but I think often what happens is they start to doubt themselves, because they realize that there are some skills that they don't have. Mm-hmm. And that's because a lot of the ad schools are also not teaching those skills, unfortunately. And they start to question whether they can really do this. And I think, to be fair to them, there needs to be a better sort of entry into agencies for the first part. And second, every agency is unique. They have their own style, their own approach, their own way of doing things. And I think it really it's the responsibility of the organization to really kind of indoctrinate students or people coming into the agency into the ways of that agency, and that can be a certain level of skill set, it can be a particular kind of approach, it can be, it's the way we do things here. And very often when I train agencies where I'm training people who've been there 5 or 6 or 7 years, and I ask them about what is the, how do they express the brand in terms of their presentation skills and so on and so forth, they shrug their shoulders, they don't have an answer. Mm-hmm. So I think that's missing as well. It's something that's kind of taken for granted.
Right.
So I think there are a lot of things, aside from kind of the nuts and bolts, and here's your orientation package, and kind of, here's the bathroom, and here's how to access the intranet or whatever. I think that there are so many other things that these kids can be trained on in terms of creating a baseline of expertise for their profession. Things like, how do we develop ideas here? Do we just go into a dark closet and hope that something pops out? How do we work together? What's the philosophy about working creative in suit? Where's the line between creativity and strategy in this agency? How do we present things? What's our brand story, and what's our methodology in terms of preparing for presentations and so on? There's so many things that so many moving parts that are not really getting fully explored.
Right. So if we were to push that onto the schools a little bit, what do you think the schools should be preparing the students for?
Well, I've talked to a lot of people about this, and I often go in and talk to students. I mean, I think it's crazy. It depends where you're going. Like if, somewhere like OCAD, for example, one of their challenges is they've got a lot of foreign language students. Right. So foreign language students are always going to have a challenge when it comes to presentation skills or copywriting. And yet they're being pushed through this program where they're not getting, I don't believe, the support they need, to really understand those skill sets. I think that what happens is it's the craft of advertising that's being taught in most of these schools. And the craft of advertising is different than the real life day-to-day of advertising. And for the 2 or 3 years that they're in school, there really is a huge focus on the craft. And fair enough, that's, but there's also a ton of other things that need to be explored, like the psychology of creativity, like understanding how to work more effectively. If you're going to be an account person, for example, if that's your ambition, how do you go into an agency and start developing really collaborative and really organic relationships with creative people? If you're a creative person, how do you learn to be more strategic? You're going to spend a lot of time focusing on creativity and the end result, but this is a business. And if you're a creative person, you're not being taught about the business of advertising, you're being taught about the creative product of advertising. And so I think what often is missing is a very well-rounded education where you understand all pieces of the puzzle as opposed to just your focus or just because there is no such thing in this day in advertising, there is no such thing as a creative person who doesn't have a huge strategic responsibility, and strategic people who don't have a huge creative responsibility. Budgets are too lean, client expectations are way too high for you to assume that you can stay in some little sort of operational box anymore. It just doesn't work that way.
I'm glad you said that, because a lot of the best creative teachers and professors right now actually are teaching that, but there's still some that it's always, here's your creative, here's your strategy, and then here's digital or whatever it might be, and everything is so completely separated that they don't know how to piece it together necessarily, and then they expect the agency to do that. So I'm really glad that you mentioned that. Well, Leslie, is there anything else you'd like to add at this point?
Well, I think the onus is on students to, when they're going into these programs, to ask for what they want and what they need. I mean, if you're going to go into advertising, you should have a passion for advertising even before you go into school. And there is no excuse for not being a huge student of advertising or creativity long before you step foot into your first class, because it is available anywhere. You should be reading Ad Age on a daily basis. You should be reading marketing, reading creativity and so on and so forth, and following all there's 1,001 blogs that feature the best work and the best insights and so on. And you should be asking for what you feel you need and want from your curriculum, because if you ask for it, if you build it, it's kind of, if you ask for it, they will build it. Is that the way it works? So. And the other thing is, when you're looking to work in an agency, ask them about training. Ask them if they're going to commit to a further development of your career, not just kind of put you to work and turn you into a workhorse, which is fair enough. We all got to pay our dues. But it's really important that you continue your education, and not just by doing, but by continuing to get the best resources from external options that you could possibly get, because they can afford it. At the end of the day, they really can. And the more they invest in you, the more you should be committing to them. So it works both ways. So if your agency trains you, stay with that agency and be committed.
Great, perfect. Well, we look forward to more videos with you, and obviously you'll be contributing to Voices at some point here as well, so we'll make sure that those go up, and we thank you so much for your time today.
Beautiful. Mwah.